You'd think sleeping outside in wolf and bear country was a death sentence. One wrong move, one careless night, and you'd wake up as breakfast. But for Native Americans, the wilderness wasn't a death trap, it was home. They slept in the open, surrounded by creatures that could tear a human apart, yet they rarely feared the dark. Why? Because they mastered something far more powerful than weapons: awareness. Forget tents, fences, or safety manuals. Their first line of defense was invisible. It started long before they ever lay down to sleep. It began with the ground beneath their feet. Knowing where not to camp could mean the difference between a peaceful night and never waking up again. Animal trails were the first clue. To the untrained eye, a faint path in the dirt was nothing. But to them, it was a neon sign flashing, "Danger, night traffic ahead." These trails were the highways of the wild, carved by generations of deer, elk, and predators that followed them. You didn't pitch camp there unless you wanted a bear wandering through your bedroll at 2 a.m. Experienced scouts could spot a trail from 20 paces. The packed earth, the bent grass, the faint musk of passing animals. Fresh droppings or claw marks meant move along. That ground didn't belong to humans tonight. And it wasn't just about trails. Water sources, the lifeblood of every living thing, came with their own deadly risks. Sure, you needed to drink, but so did every predator within miles. Rivers, ponds, and streams were like the social clubs of the wild, bustling, crowded, and dangerous. Bears lumbered down at dusk, wolves slunk in at dawn, and mountain lions prowled the edges, waiting for an easy kill. The rule was simple: camp close enough to reach water safely during daylight, but never so close that the night traffic found you first. Then came the invisible borders only true trackers could see, the territories. Bears, wolves, and cats marked their land long before humans arrived. Adults could read these signs the way we read street maps. A scratch too high on a tree trunk meant a bear. Claw marks on the bark, piles of scat, or clawed dirt patches all whispered the same message: "You're in my house now." So they moved on. To ignore those warnings was to tempt fate itself. Before a single fire was lit, scouts swept the area like detectives at a crime scene. Every broken twig, every tuft of fur caught on bark told a story. Was it fresh? Which way did it lead? Were the prints pressed deep, meaning heavy, a predator, or light and skipping, prey? They weren't guessing, they were reading. Survival wasn't luck. It was literacy, the kind written in soil instead of ink. Once the perfect site was chosen, high ground, solid back cover, far from animal highways and watering holes, the real work began. You might think safe meant relaxed, but to them, safety was something you built. They shaped their camps like living fortresses, not with walls of stone but with strategy. Every shelter, every bedroll had a purpose. Sleeping with your back to a rock wall or a thick tree meant no one and nothing could attack from behind. That single choice erased half the directions danger could come from. Even in the wild, architecture mattered. The circle was sacred, but it was also smart. Camps were never scattered randomly, they formed rings. Every person on the outer edge faced outward, watching and listening while those in the center slept. The circle meant unity, vision, and defense. If something moved in the dark, every direction had eyes on it. It wasn't superstition, it was geometry that saved lives. These weren't fearful people huddled in the dark. They were masters of coexistence, humans who could walk through predator country not as prey but as equals. They didn't dominate nature. They understood it so completely that danger became predictable. Even comforting. To them, the forest wasn't an enemy to survive. It was a conversation to be listened to, and when you learned to listen, it always told you how to live. But once the right spot was chosen, the real test began. A perfect location didn't guarantee safety, not with wolves and bears roaming in the dark. That's when night fell, fires were lit, and ancient defense turned from instinct to art. And what they built next transformed their camps into unbreakable sanctuaries. Once the right ground was chosen, the work didn't stop. That was just the beginning. Because out here, sleeping wasn't rest, it was strategy. Every motion had purpose. Every log, every stone, every ember played its part in keeping people alive until sunrise. The smartest groups didn't just lie down and hope for peace. They built defense into the design of their camp. The layout itself was a weapon. Forget sleeping in a line or scattered across the clearing. That's how you got picked off one by one. The circular formation was everything. Everyone's back was protected. Everyone's eyes faced outward. It was instinct turned into geometry, a living shield made of people. In the center of that circle, families slept together, surrounded by the hunters and guards on the outer ring. Those outer sleepers weren't exactly sleeping. They were half awake, tuned to every sound, the rustle of grass, the snap of a twig, the shift of the wind. You couldn't sneak up on people who'd turned alertness into an art form. But human bodies weren't the only barrier. The forest itself became part of the defense. Fallen logs were dragged into position to form rough walls. Thorny brush was woven into the gaps, a natural fence line that no wolf or bear wanted to push through. It didn't have to stop them completely, it just had to slow them down long enough for the camp to react. And then came the raised sleeping platforms, the genius move of the northern tribes. A few sturdy poles, a flat layer of branches, hides stretched tight. 6 feet above ground was all it took. Bears might climb if they were desperate, but most didn't bother. The moment they had to work for it, they'd turn away, looking for something easier to catch. Up there, with the firelight flickering below and the stars overhead, people slept with confidence instead of fear. Even the entrances to the camp were deliberate. They weren't random gaps, they were marked, planned, and watched. Stones stacked just so, or branches bent into recognizable shapes, told everyone where the safe path in and out was. One entrance meant one direction to guard. 2 entrances meant 2 guards, no confusion. Every detail worked together. The circle formation wasn't just pretty symmetry, it was teamwork made visible. The barriers kept predators from rushing in. The marked paths focused the guards' attention. The raised beds kept sleepers out of reach. The massive tree trunks and rock faces behind the shelters turned the landscape itself into armor. These people didn't live in fear of the night. They mastered it. They designed their rest like a fortress, quiet, calm, but ready for anything. Each night was a test, and every test had the same lesson. Preparation was survival. When darkness settled, there was still one more line of defense, the one thing that made even the boldest predators hesitate. Fire. Not just warmth, not just light, but the single element that separated humans from every other creature in the forest. When the flames rose, they told the wild exactly who was in charge. The fire didn't just push back shadows, it pushed back fear itself. But keeping that fire alive through the cold, endless night was no small thing. Someone always had to stay awake. Someone always had to feed the flames. The light flickered, the smoke curled upward, and with it came safety, not just from the cold, but from everything that prowled beyond the glow. The fire was a signal to the wilderness. This place belongs to us tonight. And yet, the real secret wasn't just in the light. It was in what they learned to do with the smoke. Because that drifting gray cloud carried more protection than any weapon ever could. When night truly fell and the forest turned black, the campfire became everything. Its glow was more than light, it was safety, warmth, and command over the wild. To predators, fire meant chaos, danger, and pain. To humans, it meant control. The first people who learned to master it didn't just survive the wilderness, they ruled it. Fire was never left alone. One person always stayed awake, feeding the flames like a living guardian. If the fire died, so did their protection. Out in the distance, eyes would gleam from the dark. Wolves watching, bears wandering, all of them waiting for that flicker to fade. Because when it did, they moved in. So the watchers kept the fire breathing, steady and strong. But the clever part wasn't just in the flames, it was in the smoke. That gray drifting veil was their invisible shield. The thick scent of burning would confuse every predator's greatest weapon, its nose. Bears could smell food from miles away, but not through smoke. Wolves relied on scent trails to hunt, but smoke scrambled their maps. It didn't just hide human scent, it lied about it, spreading it in all directions so no animal could tell how many people were there or where exactly they were sleeping. Some groups went even further. They'd scatter small embers around the perimeter, not enough to start a fire, just enough to glow faintly through the dark. Those glowing dots made silent alarms. Anything trying to sneak in would step on heat and rustle in panic, waking the lightest sleeper instantly. Even the ashes themselves had purpose. Cool ash sprinkled around camp carried the smell of burned wood, a message every predator understood. Fire lives here. And then there were the torches. When people had to move after dark, they didn't go quietly. They carried light with them, flames hissing and snapping, a message of power cutting through the black. Predators feared that sound, the crackle of fire, the pop of resin, the unpredictable glow. It was the sound of danger in their world. Still, fire alone wasn't always enough. There were nights when hunger made animals bold. That's when our ancestors turned to another kind of weapon, sound. You might think silence was safer. Stay quiet, don't draw attention. But they knew better. Quiet prey gets hunted. Loud prey gets left alone. So they filled the night with their voices. Humming, chanting, speaking in low tones that rolled through the dark like a living heartbeat. To wolves and bears, it sounded like numbers. Too many humans, too much risk. When something moved too close, they turned the noise into chaos. Shouts, claps, the clash of wood against stone. Sudden, loud, unpredictable. Predators hate surprises. They'd retreat into the dark, unnerved by a camp that fought back with sound instead of fear. Around the camp's edges, simple alarms hung from low branches, pebbles in woven baskets, hollow bones strung with sinew. When an animal brushed past, the soft rattle broke the night's rhythm, waking everyone at once. There was no panic, no confusion, only readiness. Each person knew their place, their job, their movement. Sometimes, the singers turned defense into ritual. The night songs weren't just protection, they were connection, to each other, to the fire, to the land that tested them every night. They didn't just sing to stay safe. They sang to remember that they belonged here, that the dark wasn't their enemy. Because in the end, safety wasn't about walls or weapons. It was about understanding, the kind that comes from thousands of nights spent listening to what the forest says and learning how to speak back. Fire spoke with light. Smoke spoke with scent. Voices spoke with courage. And together they told the wilderness one simple truth. You can watch us, but you can't take us. But even the best defenses sometimes failed. When the fires burned low and bold predators refused to back off, our ancestors had one last secret. A kind of invisible weapon that didn't rely on fire, sound, or fear. They used scent itself as armor. When the glow of the fire wasn't enough and the night grew too still, they reached for a defense that couldn't be seen, one carried on the wind itself. The battlefield shifted from light and noise to scent and instinct. Because in the animal world, smell is power. And Native Americans learned to use it like a weapon. They understood what predators trusted most, their noses. So they learned how to confuse them. Burning sage wasn't just ceremony, it was strategy. That sharp, earthy smoke covered the scent of human skin and food completely. To a bear or wolf it smelled like chaos, no trail, no pattern, nothing to hunt. Some tribes mixed sage with cedar or sweetgrass, creating smoke that burned hot and heavy, crawling through the camp like an invisible wall. It didn't just hide them, it rewrote the map of the night. And then came the stranger tricks, the kind born from desperation and genius. Fat from hunted animals, smeared around camp borders, warned predators that this land already belonged to dangerous hunters. Bears recognized it instantly. The scent said, humans kill here. Most would turn back. Wolf urine worked the same way, confusing other wolves into thinking a rival pack already ruled the area. It was primitive chemistry, but it worked. Some even used hot peppers. Crushed and mixed with fat, they created a burning paste that turned curious noses into regretful ones. One sniff and predators learned the lesson fast, don't come back here. The same plants that spiced their meals also guarded their lives. Everything with a scent became a potential weapon. Food scraps, tools, clothes, all sealed tight, hung high or buried deep. A single forgotten bone could bring trouble from miles away. Clean camps were safe camps. Order was survival. But their best defense didn't come from plants or smoke. It came from partnership, four-legged allies that never slept. Dogs weren't pets, they were guardians, soldiers, and sentinels all at once. Their noses caught danger long before human ears heard it. They'd lift their heads, stiffen, growl low, a language every person understood instantly. A single twitch of a dog's ear could wake the entire camp. Sometimes even birds joined the watch, geese or crows that squawked wildly when anything moved nearby. The night wasn't silent, it was alive with warning systems made of fur, feathers, and instinct. Humans adapted, too. They trained themselves to wake at the softest sound. One light touch, one whispered call, and everyone was alert. The watch system rotated through the night. No one slept through all the hours, but everyone survived them. And if danger still came, if the fire burned low, if the smoke thinned, if something massive moved between the trees, they didn't freeze. They acted. Every family member knew exactly where to run. Escape paths were memorized, walk during daylight until feet knew them by heart. No confusion. No panic. Just movement. Weapons stayed close. Spears, clubs, sharpened sticks. Not to attack but to buy seconds, just enough to reach safety. The strongest adults formed a circle, pushing children and elders toward escape routes while facing the threat head-on. They'd shout, throw burning branches, even fling ash and sand at the predator's face to blind it. Anything that created noise and motion. To an animal it looked like madness, a storm of sound and light. And that's all it took. They didn't need to win the fight. They only needed to convince the wild it wasn't worth having. Because that's what true survival was, not dominance but understanding. Knowing when to fight, when to flee, and when to simply disappear into the dark, leaving no trace behind. By the time dawn broke and the fire was just gray ash, the forest was calm again. The animals had gone. The people had lived. They didn't have walls, weapons, or fear. What they had was knowledge, layered, ancient, passed down through countless nights beneath open skies. And that knowledge was worth more than any fortress ever built. So next time you imagine those early people sleeping under the stars, remember, they weren't lucky. They were prepared. And maybe that's the real secret to surviving the wild, not to conquer it but to understand it deeply enough that it lets you stay,